Zimbabwean tyrant Robert Mugabe was this morning booted from office as a military coup ended his 37-year iron grip on power. The country's army confirmed the southern African nation's 93-year-old president had been detained, but insisted he was safe. Soldiers had earlier seized the country's state TV station amid explosions and gunfire after tanks rolled into capital Harare. Brits were immediately warned by the Foreign Office to stay indoors, while Americans were told to take cover and seek shelter. Exiled former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa, nicknamed the Crocodile, has been installed as leader after being flown back into the country, a Twitter account claiming to be run by plotters said. The account, with 55,000 followers, has in the past been accused of being a parody account. It said Zimbabwe was not owned by Mugabe or his wife, a reference to Grace Mugabe, who the statement accuses of taking advantage of the elderly despot. She was widely accused of running the country for infirm Mugabe and feared to be plotting a power grab when he died. The army finally stepped in yesterday after Mugabe fired popular number 2 Mnangagwa, his probable successor, last week. The alleged ZANU-PF account added, "Last night the first family was detained and are safe, both for the constitution and the sanity of the nation this was necessary. Today begins a fresh new era and Comrade Mnangagwa will help us achieve a better Zimbabwe." Leading commentator on Zimbabwean politics Chris Mnangagwa said, "This is a correction of a state that was careering off the cliff. It's the end of a very painful and sad chapter in the history of a young nation, in which a dictator, as he became old, surrendered his court to a gang of thieves around his wife." Conservative MP James Duddridge, who dealt with Zimbabwe during a spell at the Foreign Office, said Mugabe should be given a soft landing to prevent bloodshed. He said, "I very much hope for a bloodless and peaceful transition from an autocratic dictator who has served his time and needs to move on to a more democratic, open nation-state that will trade and prosper and start to rejuvenate the Zimbabwean people. There's always a concern when there's a transition of power, but we must remember Mugabe is loved by many people around Africa as a revolutionary leader. But he's morphed from that into a rather distasteful dictator who has abused his position." Providing Mugabe with a soft landing outside of Zimbabwe, which, whilst is distasteful given everything that he has done and has been done in his name, will allow for a less bloody transition. Mugabe was long seen as a hero of African independence movements after wresting control from Britain in 1980. But the tyrant earned notoriety for allowing the persecution of white farmers that led to dozens of murders in the 1990s. He also presided over a hyperinflation disaster that saw the country's currency sink in value by 79 billion %, sending millions of Zimbabweans into poverty and lowering the life expectancy from 61 to 40. The former British colony left the Commonwealth in 2003 on Mugabe's orders. He earned a reputation for falling asleep during high-level diplomatic meetings in his later years, once being snapped snoozing at the United Nations. The leadership crisis reached a head overnight when soldiers stormed the national TV station and told the nation the army was targeting criminals and was not planning a military takeover of government. Named as Major General S.B. Moyo, he added that tyrant Mugabe and his family were safe and sound, but warned any provocation will be met with an appropriate response. The dramatic scenes came as heavy gunfire and shellfire was reported in capital Harare in the early hours of this morning. The UK Foreign Office responded by telling Brits in the country to remain indoors. Major Moyo added, "We are only targeting criminals around him who are committing crimes that are causing social and economic suffering in the country in order to bring them to justice. As soon as we have accomplished our mission, we expect that the situation will return to normalcy." The U.S. Embassy in Zimbabwe says it will be closed to the public on Wednesday because of ongoing uncertainty in the capital. The embassy announced the closure on Twitter early Wednesday, shortly after at least 3 explosions were heard in Harare and military vehicles were seen in the streets. The embassy says it will remain minimally staffed. We pay for your stories. Do you have a story for The Sun online news team? Email us at tips@thesun.com.